Hi, it's Sunday, it's May 8th, it's 2011, and this is Day 9 Daily number 301. Oh. Can I just... listen. I just want to say that, for me, the hard part's done. You're saying the hard part of what? And the answer is... graduate school. That is right. I've been saying this like so much, but I'm going to keep saying it. On May 13th, I walked a little, the plank. I don't really know what sort of graduation thing that they have set up, but I'll be walking it. I'll be done with school officially. And then I'll be doing StarCraft 2 full time. Woo! Now I do apologize. I'm taking a little bit of a break. I'm going on a vacation. So I might disappear in a whir of motion for a little brief time there. But then I'm going to come back. And you know what's going to happen? Only StarCraft. Oh, that's so sweet. So that means I can devote all of my time to doing a little bit of StarCraft action. Not only trying to perform my role as the thought hammer in these dailies. That's right, bringing down the thought hammer of thinking upon the difficultness of strategies. But also, there's this great little article, and I cannot remember who wrote it at all, but it says that it describes a new kind of profession called a funsmith. And that's what I want to do. I want to try to engineer more fun all day. So that's what's going to be coming up. Woo! It's going to be awesome. So today's daily, going to be a nice, big, healthy, juicy, long games between two of my favorite players, Happy and Socke, two players that you should absolutely steal builds from. I would also like to note that Fun Day Monday is tomorrow. It is the 50 unit kill hero daily. That's right. You pick a unit. He is your hero. You hotkey him as 0. And then... he must get over 50 kills in the course of the game. And in the replay, please submit to Monday at day9.tv. Not just the replay, but also what unit got how many kills. Please do that. And we'll be doing that tomorrow. No Newbie Tuesday, because even though I'm pretty much done with the hard part of grad school, I still have to do a ridiculous amount of logistical junk in the last few days. But the important thing is that it's the last few days. You know what? Like, seriously, I can't stop just taking pens and just slamming them down. Like, seriously, just uncapping a pen, just... capping it, throwing it down, knocking it on the ground. I don't care. I don't give a damn. I'm in a great mood. And of course, I need to throw out the one last noteworthy little tidbit of information. Today, after the daily, I'll be playing Team Mana Battles with you. That's right. If you are a subscriber to the daily, please just stick around. We'll be randomly selecting some people. Big thanks to the creators of random number generators allowing us to do that. So, hey, please stay in the chat and definitely, like, say, hey, I want to play, and then I'll invite you to a party, and we'll party, and it'll be great. So I am going to do a daily now. We're going to do a daily. Team Mana Battles after this. And yes, I'm going to be streaming them, and you're going to be able to hear me talking. So, yeah. It looks a little bit like we have Happy spawning here in the top right corner. He is going to be our yellow Terran. We have Socke as the teal Protoss. Now, this game is long! For any of you who are unfamiliar with this game, this one lasted basically forever. So we are going to be speeding through some portions a little bit. But what I want to note a little bit about the map, Tal'Darim Altar, is the fact that on this particular map, as we can just see on the mini-map, there's a ton of expansions. Obviously, your natural, and then you have a second natural, and then there's just this kind of outlying fourth base. So it's very, very easy to get a lot of expos up. And I almost kind of feel like StarCraft 2 was designed for like medium-sized maps, that these big, wide-open spaces didn't even really exist until GSL made them with, maps like Terminus and Tal'Darim Altar. So there's this almost complete and total unfamiliarity of exactly how to rock and roll in a lot of these maps. For instance, Protoss Death Ball styles are not that effective. I mean, they're always going to be strong because it's called a Death Ball for a reason. But it's still not going to be as potent because of the fact that the distances are so big. It's very hard to reinforce as a Protoss buddy. It's also easy to take a lot of expansions as the opponent. So just a couple of things to consider in terms of late game play. We'll be looking at that later on in this daily. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some amazing openings by both of these players. which are really going to be smart ways to exploit the map. Socke going for a very fast Nexus. We do like this, obviously, because the map's big, and if you go for fast Nexus, this is perhaps a little bit of a subtle point, but if you go for a fast Nexus, the only way you can really defend it is with a lot of gateway units, right? I say that and that makes sense, right? If you go for a really fast Nexus first, you're not going to say, allow me to rush to Stargates to defend it. You could get cannons, but assuming you're not getting cannons, you're pretty much going to have to get a lot of gateway units. Can't rush for Colossus to defend it. Even though it is Mother's Day, and of course, happy Mother's Day to all the mamas watching, you cannot build a mothership to defend your fast expansion, so building the gateways seems very obvious, right? And everyone will just go, yeah, totally, obviously. But I want you to note how this connects to the idea that on a map like Tal'Darim Altar, and let me just do that one more time. I don't know if you guys caught that. When I did connect, I just bumped my fingers right into each other and nothing happened. But I want you to make the connection that on Tal'Darim Altar, with wide open spaces, gateway units work really well. So those two things line up nicely. And this is honestly a very subtle comment that I just made. The fact that, yeah, you know, gateway units really seem to be one of the only things that work well to defend a fast expansion. And you know what? Gateway units work well in the wide open spaces, such as those provided by Tal'Darim Altar. That is something that's very easy to overlook because it's so typical to see someone just say something like, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to expand, I'm going to build a gateway because, that's what I'm doing. And they sort of follow it blindly. But there would be other maps where it might be a little bit better to just go straight for Robo after you do this, to stick to 2 gateways instead of the usual 3 or 4. But either way, we're going to see Socke throw that second gateway down. He's chrono boosting Zealots out as quickly as he can, not actually even saving up for that warp gate, because he's going to have 2 Nexuses worth of chrono boost. He wants to save up to make sure he can at least get a decent amount of Zealots out. And keep in mind, if you chrono boost Zealots twice, you can absolutely finish 2 Zealots before that core is done. Did you know that? Whoa! Even if you didn't, this is the sort of thing that you want to be picking up. Always want to see how things align. And I suppose I'll come back to my face for a moment. This is my face. I'll talk about it with my face just a little bit. Anytime you see something a little bit unusual, just double check a couple things of what lines up where. Like, for instance, if you're someone who always Banshee rushes, just like straight up incredibly super fast Banshee rushes, and then you see someone go for 2 factories and then get a Banshee, you might say something like, yeah, you know what, we're both getting Banshees, but he's doing something kind of weird. Let me see if I can just grab just a little teensy bit of information there. So that's just kind of a little word of advice that I would caution you towards. Hey, you know what? We saw 2 Zealots are able to pop out before the Cybernetics core finishes, assuming we do the constant chrono boost. Now, if you know Happy, Happy's going to get a Banshee because that's the only thing that Happy ever does. Oh. And, of course, I don't mean that as a criticism. I just mean that as a pattern. Happy is a hard player to criticize because he just really doesn't do anything but win, like, ever. We also see that this Hellion popping out. And here's, again, something that I just cannot emphasize enough. Yet do not play with fire nearby foliage on Tal'Darim Altar. So, what did you hear me say? Well, hey, I always get a Hellion when I'm going for a Banshee just because it works out. But, hey, Hellions, those work well on the wide open spaces of Tal'Darim Altar. Can easily slip on in the front like this and get us a lot of information. That's something really important to note, because I too often see players on freaking like Shakura's Plateau, the most blockable anti-Hellion early movement map ever. Players still get a Hellion and still march it blindly up and still lose it like 100% of the time. For a map like Shakura's Plateau, perhaps getting this Hellion, even though it might be an obvious component of your build, might not be the best thing to do. A very nice little push here. Happy doing his usual defense, doing his usual Banshee tech play. So some good stuff coming up. Always keep the Hellions alive as ridiculously long as possible. Never hit a point where you're mentally like, oh, yep, now's a good point to suicide. And I would like to point this out for any of you who did see Day 9 Daily number 299, I think it was, where we looked at this great little opening by Happy, where Happy was doing this, where he'd get his starport, but he would be throwing down a command center a lot earlier than that. Again, on Tal'Darim Altar, a lot of big wide open spaces. In particular, this is a big wide open space, so he needs to absolutely defend this as best as he can. Cannot rely on any sort of cutesy defense. But the player that I really want to be focusing on for the next brief period of time, as we advance to time 2 etude, is Socke. Did a lot of very good smart business. In particular, he went to Warp Gates and then he got a Robo Facility. Why? Because this is something that's very, very important. Listen. When you're scouting, you generally don't get to just go in his base and scout. Generally never. It's so important that you see what is at the front. Scouting the front. I say this so much, but this is one of the greatest examples ever of scouting the front. If you go for a really early expansion, what's your number one concern? I don't want to die. So it would seem so logical to get a lot of gateways early on to prevent dying. Getting a robotics facility early for an observer is a great way to not have enough units and end up dying. But he got the following scouting information by checking the front. Oh my god, look, a factory and a bunker. Oh my god, I see it right there. And you know what the factory's doing? Nothing. It's not building anything. It's almost as though he's going for a Banshee and only needed the factory as a tech path. Oh, yeah, yes. Anytime your opponent messes with you, don't just think of it as, oh my goodness, he's trying to mess with me. Think of it in a very confident way. Think of it as, oh, thank you for bringing that scouting data to me. I saw a Hellion pop out from Terran, and given the timing, he had to have constructed that right when a factory finished, a factory that was built as fast as possible. Thank you for providing me with that information, Happy. I didn't know that until you brought it to the front of my base. Even if for some reason you're thinking, well, goodness, doesn't he have a ton of Marines right here? Isn't that a possible threat? Run a Stalker up, take some shots, pull back, and see how much damage it took. It's very easy to calculate exactly how many Mariners there were. So Socke doing a very, very smart powering play, getting himself an ultra-fast Robo Facility, so that way he can get observers out wicked quick and be able to deal with the Banshees. But of course, because Happy's happy, he will get 4 kills and run away, no problem. Also, we end up seeing a Forge come down. These 2 gateways haven't even popped into the fray. I mean, hell, look at the units. 2 Zealots! Oh, now 6 Stalkers, a very small army thus far. And Socke is spending all his Chrono Boost on probes, throwing down these 2 photon cannons. And this might seem a little excessive. It might just seem a touch excessive. I would actually like to consult you, beautiful, beautiful folks. Why exactly do I think the 2 cannons there is not necessarily a bad idea? As you'll know, I'm the sort of individual who absolutely just vomits whenever someone builds a whole bunch of extra defense that they don't necessarily need. So I would be very, 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 very pumped to see someone give a little bit of comments. Yeah, you know, all right, here we go. Yeah, so it deals with the Banshees directly. That's a good one. That's a really, really good point. But you know what? We're going to see so many great points coming out in the chat. Love that. Yeah, Demystify SC2 says drop defense, and as well as Banshees. Obviously, totally dead on the money. Man, that was hard for me to say. I'm tripping over my words a lot. By the way, I'm a little haggard, as you see, to the TSL cast this morning, and actually fell asleep immediately thereafter and awoke to do a daily. Yeah. All right, yeah. I love this point by MI Rager, who says it's a big map and it makes you move out easier. On a really small map, like let's take a ridiculous example, Steps of War, that's actually been popped out of the map pool. That map was so tiny that, yeah, if you built all that static defense, that would really eat your ability to move out. And if you just built some units, you could defend it and then immediately walk to the front of his base. It would be no problem whatsoever. Oh, yes, I love this. Dingo Blue says he's using the forges for upgrades as well. Other people are referencing the fact that this is a huge area that's very droppable. All this is great. The big things I want to note. Forge, yes, we definitely get the forge and upgrades up. Big map, yes, we definitely can easily move out, and this will help with obvious stuff like the Banshees, but the one other little teensy-tiny thing I want to note, we early expanded, so we already have a little bit of a resource lead, so it's okay if we use that resource lead to kind of pop back to just marginally ahead instead of a lot ahead. It's a very, very important concept. If I was on one base for a really long time and then I expanded, would not be so good to get a forge because I'm probably not ahead economically. But hell, we've even seen no expo from the opponent. There's the orbital command finally going down for Happy. There's his ultra duper super fast stim. And the Raven coming out. There's the factory doing a little bit of movement action. The double bunker. Very typical stuff coming down. And Socke, I love this way he's playing. Just getting a lot of gateways with a really fast robo. Oh, still going Banshees. Will allow me to get some forges with some upgrades. Oh, Twilight Council, allow me to get double forge with double upgrades. Just doing not a lot of gateways. Everything else that is really solid. And also note, one other reason why double cannon here is good for Socke. He's not going crazy double cannoning in the back of his base. He's just putting cannons at the very vulnerable location. I'm going to try to rely on these units. Again, might look perhaps not so conservative, but actually is a pretty conservative cannoning up by Socke. And another expansion going down. Holy crap! Oh! You're a good player, Socke. And you are a total heavy metal rock star. I don't know if any of you have seen photos of Socke, but that guy was born to rock out. Oh, Sentry ends up sacrificing itself. There we go. There's a little bit of a Nexus. And getting the blink. Everything's so great. I want to point out something that's very important. When we did Day 9 Daily number 299, it was all about how Happy is so good, splitting up his Banshees and then joining them together, doing all this wonderful business with his big Marine Marauder, getting Ravens out, having good defense, getting his expansion up at a reasonable point in time. You heard me just pat and pat and pat Happy nonstop. Ooh, double upgrades, all sorts of good jazz. And everyone was saying, oh my gosh, how does one stop this Happy Banshee harass? It seems way too good. Well, the answer that we gave was, what is Banshee Harass bad at? And exploiting all that. If you go for a Banshee Harass, there's no way that our opponent's going to be attacking the front. What helps us defend against a frontal attack? A lot of gateway units. So Socke literally did everything except build a lot of units. He got detection, he got double forges, he teched, he took another expansion, he took another expansion, and there's literally nothing that this Banshee player can really do about it. I mean, this force is just not that big from Happy. He has 7 Marauders, 1 Medevac, 9 Marines, 11 Marines. Oh, excuse me. Well, look at Socke. He already has 11 Zealots and 9 Stalkers. I mean, big force for Socke compared to the Terran player with just 4 gateways. The most important word in that whole sentence was compared, right? Socke has a lot of units compared to his opponent. There's no such thing as a lot of units in general. You always have more units relative to how many units your opponent has. So that's what's making Socke perform so strongly in this game, is that fact alone, right? He is just barely maintaining enough of a unit lead and then getting all this other tech. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The one thing to note is that it's not like Socke is absolutely Hulk smashing Happy into the ground. Happy is also doing the same thing. Happy is teching up a lot, because if we have our opponent pinned it back with Banshees, he's also bad at attacking. So Happy's getting all his tech and getting his Mobius Reactor, which I swear always looks like Cloak. Ugh. Planetary Fortress. Upgrading and more transferring going on, and this might actually wrap up the early game segment. We see now, oh yes, it looks like Colossi popping down. Yeah, this is all pretty typical jazz. Getting some cannons out. You know, honestly, I would not mind more forward cannon placement. I would not mind building like a cannon more like here or here. Regardless, I'm a big fan of walling this off, or at the very least building a lot of pylons and having a teensy little slit right here for my units to pop through. Yeah, just taking good old lessons from Brood War Protoss versus Terran. Now, as you know, my voice is getting a little raspy. I've been spending way too much time not sleeping and trying to work my little butt off, so I might get water. Oh, don't worry, guys. The faucet's like right down the hall. Promise won't take long, but I just want to let you know so you can mentally cope and begin to prepare. Let's pop back into the game. We're not going to do it yet. I'm not quite thirsty enough at the moment. Coming back to the production tab, we see the Dark Shrine going down, charged, completely, totally done. And what we're going to see Socke do is set himself up for the late game. Set himself up for the late game, and we're going to also see Happy set his kind self up for the late game. And I think that what I am actually going to do is just pause for a moment, and I want everyone to think quite deeply as you can, about how you prepare for the late game. Like, I'm going to now define the late game as when you're maxed, you have everything you could ever want, and what are the things that you're going to want to do that are really basic. I know a lot of people are like, it is important to occasionally research the speed upgrade for your warp prisms, thereby magnifying the effectiveness of your late game harassment. Yeah, that's a little thing. I'm talking about big, obvious shit. Like, one of the really big, obvious things, if your late game is Protoss, you should have 2 forges upgrading like crazy. Or if you're Terran, you should have 2 engineering bays upgrading like crazy. Just basic junk. Think about that while I get some water. When we come back, we're going to discuss what you find folks is saying. Just so thirsty. Just so thirsty. Can't believe it. Don't worry, I'm still within earshot. See, I'm here. Faucet's right in here. Yeah. Oh. Delicious. That water was delicious. Alright. Taking these things. Hey, Turb 540. I suck at reading numbers. He says he likes to spin his chair to prepare for the late game. Yes. Let's see here. What are some good things? Obviously, people are talking about, like, I suppose I was a little vague. Some people saying, you know, like, upgrades, units, vision. Upgrades, units, vision, infrastructure. You know what? Actually, it sounds like it's a funny comment from Sunsterson. He says 36 warp gates. Now, that might actually seem ridiculous. 36 is kind of overdoing it. But yeah, the important idea is that you want to have way more upgrades than you could ordinarily sustain. Like, if you're on 2 bases that are ultra saturated, you might be able to support like 7, maybe 8 gateways. Or if you don't have to build pylons anymore, yeah, you could probably do a solid 8. So you might just say to yourself, you know, well, I'll have 8 gateways on these 2 bases, but what if you've been maxed for a really long time? It actually helps to have 10, 11, 12, 13 gateways or something like that. Because then when you get in a battle, you can immediately re-replenish with way more units and be maxed again very, very, very quickly. 8 gateways for 2 bases assumes that you're constantly building, but when you're maxed, you hit a point where you just can't build anymore. And it's funny because maxed late game logic was not as essential in StarCraft 1 as it is in StarCraft 2. In almost every game of StarCraft 2, players are getting maxed. Rarely in Brood War games would players end up getting maxed at any point. So the maxed logic, having more unit-producing structures than you could ordinarily handle, is really important. There was another great comment in here about ghosts. There it is. XDS Man, talking about building early ghosts, have a lot of energy for EMPs and shields for the High Templar. Absolutely true in preparing to get to the late game, and that's also an important concept to note when you get to the late game, is that things like, I built a Raven really early on, like, you know, Happy did this thing. He always builds an early Raven, so that way he has 2-point defense drones, and you really only need 1 or 2 well-placed point defense drones to monumentally swing the favor of battle towards you, instead of towards him. But what do you do in late game? Once you've lost your whole frickin' army, you have to be very, very careful to make sure that you're replenishing that sort of thing properly. We're going to see a lot of big battles that are going to ensue in the later stages of the game. Some that work out well, some that work out not so well. And a very important idea that I want you to note is how the unit blob movement relates to the expansion. This is one of the most important concepts in any RTS. It doesn't get talked about enough. It will be talked about much more in the coming year of StarCraft 2 because players will have a much better sense of what strategies work and what don't work. Nowadays, it's like, I didn't know that that attack killed me. I wonder a way to stop that. And that attack needs no finesse, no refinement, nothing clever about it. He can just sort of do that. But once players are both kind of good with their setups and kind of well established, then unit movement is absolutely critical. If you don't believe me, go watch SCFOU versus Nesty on Crossfire. Incredible, incredible game. So we see Socke cutting up this way and cutting back down. Again, how does that relate to these expansions? He's going to have these units positioned, always favoring a little bit more towards the middle as opposed to a little bit more towards this side because of the fact that he has this expansion that he needs to worry about. I mean, if he expanded here, for instance, it would be a lot more reasonable to favor being on this side of the cliff. Little tiny teensy things you like that. So we're now seeing Happy get his double ups fairly close to done. It looks like Socke getting close to the end of battle. Interestingly, Socke stopped producing once he hit 150 and instead built tons of unit-producing structures, got all the gateways. Look at this. Let me see if I can count this. Okay, so we have, ooh, it looks like 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 gateways. A lot of gateways, but that's fine. That's exactly what you want. Protoss needs to begin spreading pylons all around the map. We're going to see that come into absolute essential use. We're going to see Happy get a ridiculous amount of infrastructure here, defensive infrastructure. And there's a couple of techniques that I want you to think about before they end up coming up. Here's my army. I'm Happy. Here's my army. You are Socke. We will engage in battle and one of us will win. But how can we do damage elsewhere at the same time? I just want to throw that out there. How can we do damage elsewhere at the same time? Our huge-ass, giganto, mega, giger, beastly, scary, flexing German and or Romanian army are engaging. We don't want to say something like, yeah, I will take 40 Marauders and send, or, 20 Marauders over here, and these other 20 Marauders will stay in my main battle. Because you know what happens? The 20 Marauders that go over there, they'll get eliminated by the main army of Protoss, and then he will engage your small, pathetic main army and kill that one too. You can't just do easy, straight-up splits. So what are some clever techniques that you can do? Let me just throw one out as an example for each race. For the Terran, you could research Nitro packs and every now and again make 3 to 4 Reapers and just send them over to one of these expansions. Very easy, very simple technique to do. For Protoss, what else could you do? You could just have a Dark Templar wandering around constantly trying to shut down expansions. That's a great way to do a lot of damage without a big investment. In particular, a way to do a lot of damage that doesn't involve weakening your main army by that much. Think of all the ways that you can do damage without weakening your main army. Socke spreading out pylons, continuing to get a little bit of vision control. Sacrificial Colossi, ugh. Socke pulling up to the left and middle portion of the map. Behind him, he has this expansion. Perfect. Honestly, most locations would be fine for Socke to expand to, given the fact that his army's there, but let's continue to relate these expansion timings, or expansion placements, to where the army is moving. Hey, where's Happy going? He's cutting left. Why would he be cutting left? Because he has an expansion command center, and by cutting left, notice all this huge army in the way of anyone doing anything to this fourth base that Happy really wants a lot. I call this cutting in, whenever you take an army that has a clear path that it wants to go to, and it cuts in somewhere else and then backs off. Really, really key. Couple easy ways that you see cut-ins. Cutting in towards a watchtower to make sure that an expansion's defended, and then pulling right on back, and then perhaps he was just going to head south as normal. Making that first cut to the left, really, really important. Just eliminating a few essential units. Yeah, look, cutting back, and then he's going to swing all the way down back this way. Very, very simple cut going on right there by Terran. Or, if Protoss wanted to attack this base, or this base, sometimes a really great way to do it is just to cut in here. Like, for instance, let's say Protoss really wanted to kill this base. He would move his army up here, and then advance just slightly up this way, and then pull back down. Just cutting in right there. Cutting in, very, very important. That's one of the biggest characteristic differences between a really strong Grandmaster level of any race, and then your sort of lower Grandmaster and higher Master. You'll see them just straight up. You'll see, the weaker players just straight up send units where they want to go, whereas all the tip-toppers will be doing all sorts of great little cuts. So not really the best angle. In fact, those force fields almost hurt the hurt the Terran. Excuse me, hurt the Protoss more than hurt the Terran. And, I mean, this is the first really big engagement that's going to go on. We see, I don't know if you guys saw this, but this whole army actually just was birthed. Look at this. Yeah, these are like 4th trimester little baby guys popping out right now. Fresh new. Oh, you like my Zealot? Oh, he's 6 weeks old. Really, really young units. This is part of this replenishing concept of having more gateways than we could traditionally sustain. Yeah, look, I think we're up to 18 gateways. No, we actually have way more than that. Let me actually just select. Yeah, it looks like we almost have 24 gateways. Looks like we're hanging down at 22, getting more bases up. This will be very important for putting pressure on later on. We see Happy having a lot of barracks, but I would imagine Happy's actually going to struggle in some later positions. Could potentially be a little bit counterproductive. Rarely do you see this much late game logic coming in. Hey, look, it's a cut in from Happy, and the expansion is now going down. Nifty, thrifty, fantastic, snappy. So, at this point in the game, we've seen an engagement. I want to focus slightly less on how the engagements individually go. Because I think all of you know that, yeah, the Vikings got to hit the Colossi, the Ghosts got to hit the Templar, got to EMP things properly. Everyone's pretty gosh darn familiar with all that jazz. What we want to look at is overall concepts of how the hell is one supposed to play the late game, and why the hell are probes so dumb? That is the longest path. Alright, I'm not going to worry about it. So already we're seeing a nice little bit of pressure that Socke is applying. Applying this without really using his main army. I was mildly concerned when I saw Socke pull his whole army back here. He should really be pulling his whole army back to this watchtower, because he can always swing back this way and defend by warping in sentries and locking off and forcing the field of battle here, but he can also defend this bottom one and this left one. Socke actually had a fairly large window of vulnerability there. Continuing to do a little pressure, but fortunately Socke doing a very nice little job of warping in all over the place. Socke having pylons here, pylons there, pylons everywhere. Yeah, hey, look, it's an engagement that's going to go very similar to how every single other engagement goes. A lot of EMPs, all that sort of jazz. How nice that Socke can warp in everything mid-map. He is a 3-2-3. Very cool, very good, very excellent. No storms going off. Warping in. This is ordinary, but still pretty important to note that really Protoss was kind of dying in the midst of that fight. Let's actually return back here. I'm actually, before I even make this point, I just want to make a quiz. What is the #1 thing that you should always do in an RTS? What's the #1 thing you should always do in an RTS? Actually, StarCraft 2, I always freak out whenever someone does this. I always freak out whenever someone doesn't do this. It's so bad. You always must. You always must. People saying scout, count units. Come on, look at the mini-map. Actually, look at the mini-map. I say a ton. Even more fundamental than the mini-map. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, Soft Coner. Spend your money. Spend your fucking money. Spend the money, right? You don't save money in a real-time strategy game because it's done in generally like 10 minutes. Spend that money. Spend it. Spend the money. Now, you heard me talk about, oh yes, blah, 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 oversaturate in terms of gateway production, more than you can possibly sustain. It basically is another way of saying, yeah, when you're maxed, you can't spend your money, so the instant you're unmaxed, you need the best possible ways to spend your fucking money, right? And this is actually what happens in this exact battle. Look at them. We see Socke just getting mauled, like it's absolutely wrecked. But because he can spend his money really easily, oh, look at this whole brand spanking new army that he has. Oh, look, we even have some more units over here. Oh, yeah, look, we're warping in, and oh no, we're losing some Vikings. Happy, maxing out on production. See those little white dots? Beautifully placed, double white dot on that starport. Doing a fantastic job, so great. But he really cannot spend his money at the same rate as Socke. And as a result, Socke gets a little bit overeager, misplaces his army just a smidge. We are seeing Socke be slightly ahead in terms of the assimilator, or excuse me, in terms of the expansion count. He's now getting this extra expansion, like that expansion placement, because again, these units in the middle, relating it back to the expansion, can easily pop back here. When you do expand as Protoss, little tiny tip, build a couple of pylons, one near the front, and then kind of a couple like this. I generally build at least two, one to just power anything I want, and then one kind of behind the minerals, because I always want to be able to warp in and not get sort of denied by some very nicely timed drop. So we see some more movement coming out right now, and I actually want to back up just 10 more seconds, and I'm going to ask kind of an interesting late-game question. In Brood War, this was a big mid-game consideration. It's less the case in StarCraft 2, but still one of the cruxes of gameplay. What should Protoss's plan be right now? what the heck is Protos's plans? What are his plans? Rather than pull the audience, I'm just going to say that a lot and just let you think about that right now. What could his plans possibly be? What is Protoss trying to do against this Terran player? You need to have a plan. I mean, okay, I want blah unit mix. Okay, you know what? You have the perfect unit mix, Happy. You have the perfect unit mix. You can get the max army. Now, what do you want to do? Or I guess, you know, for either player, you have the max army, everything's perfect. What do you want to do? What's your goal? If you watch Boxer versus Sen in a lot of games, you'll see Boxer just drill all the closest expansions while dropping the farthest away bases. He puts all the focus on this huge, big army and drops the far away one. And in a sense, just trying to make sure that the Zerg, and here's the most important part, doesn't get up to about 5 bases. He would prefer to keep Zerg on less than 4, but if the 4th base gets up, he'll try to deny the 5th. In this one, almost all late game plans on any map revolve around trying to control expansions. Either control him from getting some or allow you to get some more. If I'm Socke, my goal is to keep this as secure as possible. Because if I have this expansion secured, I immediately know that this base is secured, and I immediately know that this base is secured. Well, this base is, I would probably say, 80% secured if you have this up. And I'm also thinking I better not let Terran get this base up. I'd better not let him get this base up. See these 4? He's stuck in this valley. He can't really pass by this piece of terrain without extending into sort of a new region. See, from here to here, this very tiny little area defends all these 4 back expansions. Everything late game should all be about expansion timing. And this can change quite a bit. Like, I've played games very similar to this one where I'm the Protoss and I'm thinking, can't let him get this 4th base. Can't let him get this 4th base. Do not let him get this 4th base. And then he does, and I just think, all right, do not let him get these 2 bases. And it's not so much always try to deny him from getting bases, because I'm not going to lie. I never try to have a game plan that prevents Terran from taking this base. Because he's going to get it. He's guaranteed to get that base. Have you seen it? It's right here. Look, there's his natural. Oh, it's a base. So you have to make sure that you're thinking about these expanding patterns properly. Controlling 3rd base is very reasonable on a lot of maps. On Xel'Naga Caverns, I generally try to maybe delay his 3rd base, but I don't try to prevent him outright from getting it. On this map, I would argue that I want to outright prevent my opponent from doing this. Yes. Yes. And as Zammy 2024 says, F equals MA and you're gold. That's what I'm talking about, man. As long as you make a reference to Newtonian physics, I'm down. Socke expanding, a little bit crazy-like. This is not the best place to expand in the world. This is a little better, but it has rocks here, and there aren't really any other expansion choices. I would personally not really favor too much expanding, over-expanding at this point. And if I did expand like this, I would just let this die if it got hit. I would not really care as much about securing that, because again, my goal is to secure this one, and my goal is to control this one. Speaking of which, I should build a pylon here really early. Not because derp warpins are good, but because derp. I want to control that 5th base. I do not want that to happen, so I'm going to absolutely be building that there. Very, very important. Very, very important. In fact, a lot of times I would even build a pylon actually right here. I don't want to build it here because I'll see it with this floating guy, but if you build it here, you can have just enough room there. But again, in terms of controlling expansions, and that actually is quite tiny, building a little pylon here, but it's all those little tiny smart unit positioning things that allow you to sort of work your way ahead. Sending Dark Templar one at a time. Very simple technique to sort of bite away at things. More Zealots streaming in here, but it's going to be a long path to that top left area. Gotta speed it up because, hilariously, we are halfway done with this game. Hilariously enough. Happy moving out, really controlling space, and not really doing too much aggressive because this expansion isn't up. If this expansion does pop up, I would absolutely say that, you know what, Happy, now you can begin moving out. Oh, yeah, the defensive nuke. How many of you do the defensive nuke? That is one of the greatest ways to cover space. Space is one of the most important concepts in all of time. Was the #1 concept in Brood War. Not the #1 concept in StarCraft 2, but still very important. You can always throw down the defensive nuke to allow you to control that space a little bit better. Easily nuke, no way Protoss could advance to engage. Really cool stuff. And the nuke is also one of those ways, hey, that I can put pressure back on the Protoss without sacrificing strength of my main army. Hey, we see a War Prism getting produced out of one of these many, many robotics facilities from Socke. Right now, it looks kind of like a slugfest, but we're still seeing sort of consistent themes. Happy knows that this 5th is his place to control, and hey, once that 5th is up, now I can begin moving out. Oh, isn't that nice and easy and comfortable? And oh crap, Socke made a blunder. Oh, look at this. He pulled all his forces back here. We've said multiple times he really should have units at this watchtower to control all these left and southern expansions, and now we're seeing exactly why. Goes poaching on out in front. Happy could have taken out that south expansion, but it looks like he was in the mood to throw down a nuke. And this is one of the more successful nukes, as he does kill his own ghost. Very good. So Socke, I would say, with a pretty, a little bit of a lucky defense there. Getting a little bit lucky that we didn't have Happy push all the way in, that Happy was trying to do some antics with these ghosts here. But we got the chance to see that Socke was looking a little bit vulnerable. This is just a bonus expansion. This is a, hey, why the hell not sort of expansion. That's always pretty reasonable to do. There's more to talk about this. Actually has some cool aspects, but we're going to go ahead and stay focused on the big, broad, cool stuff. Look at the unit movement. Happy is going to be rallying as many of his units to his little Xel'Naga watchtower over here. And look at this, putting pressure on, scans to make sure that there is no observer, and then runs on out. Still putting a good amount of pressure, and you know this, I think, is a great little fight right here. This is a great move by Socke. He's going to end up losing a lot of units. Just gets murdered up here. But he knocked down this key control point, really knocked it down, and this Warp Prism, you heard me say having pylons here was essential, but since he couldn't get a pylon there, Warp Prism, going to serve the same purpose. Socke is looking quite comfortable. He's behind on food. I'm well aware of that. He is definitely behind on food. But he is in a much more comfortable position because he is doing a better job of controlling this base down here at the side. And it was kind of funny because both of them had 69 workers, and as you will note, I am juvenile, so that is hilarious to me. This is what I meant by let this expansion die. This expansion is so easy for Terran to kill and defend this command center at the same time. This is so easy to do. Socke warped in units, 3 units, 3 kills. This expansion here, Socke killed it off because it's so easy for Socke to kill it off and defend his expansions at the same time. You'll notice the compositions aren't that different. Probably fewer Colossi, more Mortals, still a lot of Templar out on the field. But, you know, nothing too big has really changed. And you'll note that the usual metrics for who's ahead, such as, you know, like what the food count is. By the way, I really got to remember to keep that thing up. I love this overlay. I even love how it appears. Check this out. Whoosh. Oh, I feel so powerful just by hitting Control-N on my keyboard. But I would say that Socke is in a little bit more of a comfortable position just because he is ahead in expansions and is controlling the space over here a little bit better. Still needs to have a little bit more focused positioning on all these units, but hey, look at this. Doing a lot of distracting action. If you'll note, if he can keep Happy pinned up to defending these 2 bases for enough time, I mean, whether this is efficient damage dealing or not, Happy is not as eager to move all his stuff out. Look at these little tiny forces moving up. Socke is really putting the pressure on. Would like to see more nuking come out for the Terran player. And keep in mind, it's okay to do insane shit late game. It is okay to build masses of bunkers in the middle of the map walking towards your opponent, assuming that you have the adequate infrastructure to support that. That's actually an okay thing to do. You can do that. You can even wall off an arbitrary part of the map with like 6 barracks. That's okay to do. You can pull that off. It's all about controlling expansions, controlling space, because everybody's maxed and everyone has all the upgrades. Super, super important. And hey, look at this. Socke sort of waltzing his way up here. A whole army comes in, Happy, likely to throw down a defensive nuke if he saw anything coming, but he doesn't. Throws down an offensive nuke. And we saw this exact play from QXC against MVP Genius. And I waited till now to point this moment out, but wait a minute. I want you to note this. Oh my gosh. If Happy just bounces back and forth between these two watchtowers and occasionally poaches up here to nuke this Nexus, he can both control this expansion and these two left ones at the same time. You know, if I were Protoss, excuse me, if I were Terran, I would try to pass through the middle a lot, bounce back around these watchtowers, and just try to nuke this base and maybe even this base with a medevac. That would be my crutch play. Exactly what we saw QXC do to crush MVP Genius on Xel'Naga Caverns. Definitely watch that game. That was from the Team Liquid Star League. I didn't get the chance to cast it, but I did get the chance to watch it. And oogle, 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 oogle. Oogle, oogle, oogle. So we're seeing again Socke having good focus, moving up towards that top left side of the map. Going to speed things up a little bit. Want to make sure that we don't run too long today. All sorts of things being warped in on that backside. Also, I would absolutely not mind doing little compositional things, you know, like never making any Zealots anymore, just making like Immortals and Archons. Like, you can do insane, crazy jazz like that. And it's pretty sweet. Oh, managing to get himself an EMP off. And you can have some compositional goals, like I want to engage him so much that his medevacs run out of energy. If you have the resources to do that, that's awesome, but make sure that you're careful. A lot of snipes going on, amazing compositions by both players. Socke does not come out on top because Happy is pretty good. And we're going to move it up. Now, see, I love the fact that Socke has that rally point right there. I love that. Very clearly, easily defending those bottom 4 bases. You're starting to see why it's so tempting to be like, what is this, just this giant slugfest? Does anything even happen in this game? Does anything even happen ever? Of course, Socke not favoring beastly units like Archons, instead favoring nimble units like Zealots, like Stalkers, like High Templar. High Templar actually a very cheap unit, 5150. Not a lot of money in the late game. So doing some very, very cool stuff, allowing him to maintain aggression. But, you know, this aggression is all focused around just knocking out these top expansions. And, you know, it's kind of a funny moment because right now, if I were Protoss, I had previously been saying, yeah, you know what? I wanted to prevent him from getting this and this, but he has that now. And I might try to kill it off before he mines too much, but after it's been up for a little while, I want to change my plan to the next phase. And really, now Socke has changed his plan to, I want to defend this base. Everything Socke does needs to just defend that base as much as humanly possible. Could do some slightly better things in terms of unit control, but positionally and goal-wise, this is the money spot right here for the Protoss player. If he can control this base, obviously this one isn't going to be hard to lock down, but this one's going to be very hard for Terran to control. More big engagements going on. More big engagements. Oh, the defensive nuke. A cool play, but a little bit of a hope and play right there. See the huge engagement right now. And if I were Protoss and I ended up crushing in this particular fight, what I think is the far and away best choice to do is to just expand here, build a lot of pylons, and then do my best to put some pressure on here, but not as much. I probably would... Oh, and by the way, here's one of the greatest examples of a cut-in. If I were Protoss and I really wanted to bring some noise, I would actually push to about here. And then I would pull all the way back and hit this expansion. That's a great example of a cut-in right there. Happy doing a very, very cool, smart little play here. Doing a little drop. And we could ask the question, why hasn't Happy been doing these drops beforehand? They look oh so effective. And the answer is that I just really haven't talked about it this game. We could go into a long, in-depth discussion about that. However, suffice to say that that could be part of your goal. You obviously have to make sure that when you do those drops, it doesn't make your main force so weak that you end up just, you know, sacking that. That's why the biggest amount of breakaway from the big fights has been, oh yeah, the biggest set of units that have broken away are 2 Stalkers and 3 Zealots up here, or a nuke over here. If you try to do a drop of this size, it's a little bit dangerous, and this could potentially be a moment where Happy really begins to fall behind. Yeah, you know, this There's ways to make this sort of dropship play work, but you have to be so careful because now look at the position Happy's in. He doesn't really even have that many units. He really just has a whole bunch of his medevacs, his primary units to help keep all his other stuff alive. They're all going to die. And over here we see Happy now desperately trying to make new medevacs. This actually was probably the blunder of the game that I think Happy's really just going to be like, no, yeah. So now Protoss's entire goal, again, to defend this expansion. We're going to see everything gearing up to that side. We see Templar spread out. We see control of the watchtowers, just being so beneficial right now. There's the scans. Needs more pylons around here. So many more and more pylons. But the big important aspect is that suddenly by having control of this base, Socke now locks down this one. There's no way for either player really to safely take this one. That's kind of what Socke wants, because Socke is saying, hey, I officially have 2 more bases than you do. Never say die. What a cool unit the Ghost is. Gosh, Happy is so good, so good. There was an attempted defensive nuke that failed. And I just want to note one more thing. If you're ever looking for some cleverness, look at players' hotkey setups late game. Control 1. Everything here, including the Vikings, would not have thought that. Control Group 2. All the Ghosts. And then we see 3 are Barracks, 4 is Factory, 5 is Starport. And I especially love this 0 as the Engineering Bay, Ghost Academy, and Armory. Oh, Happy gives an entire hotkey to all his upgrading structures. That's easy to do. I know you don't use your whole keyboard. I know you don't use your whole keyboard. You could. And you could do a lot more easier upgrading without ever having to leave your home. And what's so interesting to me about this moment in the game is that I think it's suddenly like one of those, oh yeah, I really do think Socke is in a really, really good position right now. And it's all just been having a very simple goal, just continuing to batter these expansions. No funny business trying to knock down any of the stuff in the main. Oh, by the way, yeah, that's what I'm talking about with unit-producing structures. Yeah, look at all them barracks. But yeah, very simple, straightforward, sort of just kind of working his way here, trying to get this, trying to deny that. This is a blunder. Look at all those units going for this command center. And all these units, oh, wait, what are you doing, Happy? Oh, Happy could have just made a sprint and run with just a handful of Marauders and knocked out that expansion. That would have been really, really nice. And if I were Terran, the way I would have done that is I would have taken most of my forces and cut in here, and then taken a small number and moved over here. Again, just getting in between this army, what I want to do at that left base, and my main army. With Socke, you know, after that little escapade on that right side, still smartly pulling everything over to the left. In the unit counting station, we do see 34 probes from Socke. Has actually sacked a significant amount of probes, so that way he can continue to strengthen his late-game force with more and more units. There is a Nexus going down, more pylons going down. Love this pylon placement. This is some of the best pylon placement of all time, because he definitely can warp in plenty of units, such as these ones. Feedback, yeah! And here, looks to me a little bit like a final confrontation could potentially be coming up. Could be coming up. Here it goes. And yes, looks like with all those extra units from sacking those probes, Socke is quite a ways ahead. And look at this! Socke did not go and attack this expansion because his goal no longer is to kill expansions. His goal is to starve the opponent. Most play styles revolve around trying to deny expansions, trying to pick off expansions, or more generally trying to starve the opponent. So now Happy is really kind of in a bind. He clearly cannot push that left side. It's far too defended, just hoping he can get the right, but Socke is going to have way too many units and is going to say goodnight. Too happy. Snipe, 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 GG. Bam! Oh, yes! Space controlling army movement expansion ship formations. I didn't want to say expansion ship shape, which is what I almost said, but that's fine. That was very, very cool game, very awesome. But you'll note that they were maxed for a long period of time, but Socke just sort of slowly worked his way up. A couple of concerning moments there where I was like, ugh, I could lose an expansion, but not a big deal. Fantastic little game. And as we got the chance to see, there's actually a lot of decisions that happen in the late game in terms of positioning that are very easy to sort of neglect due to the fact that especially if you're not like, Grandmaster or Master level, it's very easy for your games to kind of consistently only ever have you be maxed once. There's not like, yeah, I've been maxed for the last 20 minutes and we've been having a lot of battles. It's pretty atypical at those non-master level games just because one player ends up losing. It takes two really good players to force that to that situation. And even if you never really get to that, big max versus big max situation for a long time, you still will benefit greatly from having good cut-ins, good expansion ship timings, good goals related to the expansions. So that's going to be that. We're going to take some questions, and then I'm going to power down the stream. And when I power it back up, I'll be playing Mana Battles with you. That's right. For any of you who did not know, Day9 TV has a voluntary subscription service. If you don't subscribe, nothing changes. It's all still free jazz. But if you do subscribe for the ever so crushing price of $5 a month, if you do subscribe, you not only get that fancy little chat badge, you see many starred people talking, but also you get the chance to do little fun events such as Mana Battles with me, which is what's happening tonight. Yeah! So starred subscribers definitely stay in the channel. Log on to US server, and then you can play with me. My name is Day9, and I'll be adding you. So get ready to have your character code and ID on tap, on availability. We'll be doing some 4v4s. It'll be awesome. Can't wait. Can't frickin' wait. There's one more thing I wanted to say. Nope. Can't remember it. If you want to subscribe, by the way, just go to day9.tv and you'll see down at the bottom of the Justin TV page, there's just a subscription link, and you just click on it, and then you follow the instructions because Justin TV provided those instructions for learning. Let us take some questions. Now here's an interesting question by Custom Call, who says, Dear Day9, as a Zerg player, what are your recommendations to control space, since the Zerg usually can't have as strong of a full army and will be killed if they end up in a direct confrontation? As a matter of fact, movement and controlling space is really essential for Zerg, just due to the fact that they're so fast. They can do a lot of counterattacking, which we almost never see, weirdly enough. There's very little late game counterattacking going on. Mutalist counterattacking late game is super strong. If you don't believe me, watch Nesty versus SC Foyu. Nesty does it constantly throughout that entire semifinals. That was from the Gom TV semifinals that actually happened a few days ago. Phenomenal unit movement. Also, if you watch July versus Huck on Crossfire, another GSL Code S match, you can see amazing unit positioning by July, just constantly forcing the army back. Because I actually think that if Zerg does have a chance to kind of like get like a good, nice, big, maxed army with the composition they want, they're going to be obviously as strong as the other races. What really sucks is when you have, a 6-minute period where you're only making roaches and then you get maxed, and then you kind of stay maxed on this only roach mix, and ooh, it's crappy. But I mean, if you've seen a Zerg that has like Broodlords and Queens and Infestors and Ultralisks and Hydras, it's nasty. But with those fast units do a lot of counterattacking. Zerg also have the huge benefit of being able to Nidus Worm both for offense and defense. There's actually some really cool techniques where you can push in really hard with a huge army, and you can force him, like, if we actually look at this mini-map here, where you could do something like, let's say Protoss had these 3 bases, and you were Zerg. As Zerg, you would push with your big army down to, like, here. So where would Protoss rest his army? Well, that's pretty straightforward. He'd probably rest his army here. And as you do that, as you're pushing down here, you Nidus Worm the back of Protoss's main. And feel free to build 3 Nidus networks. You can build Nidus Worms 3 at a time. Especially when he's mined out, he's not going to have the easiest time warping in. And then what you actually do is you pull all your units back into the Nidus networks that you would have like here or so, and just begin pumping stuff into his base. And always remember that you can just run away. Zerg are actually, I think, like the most terrifying to play against the late game, because, especially on a map like Tal'Darim Altar, you can just get Nidus Wormed everywhere, and Mutalisks are still so fast that what happens is Zerg actually forces your army to be wrenched apart and can exploit whatever crappy composition you do. I actually don't think any Zergs should be trying to do a lot of direct confrontation fighting. If they can do a lot of this Nidus network play, definitely do the direct confrontation if you have like the way bigger army. I mean, don't make stupid decisions just for the sake of doing Nidus Worming. But definitely, like, multiple Nidus Worms, just like, hell, if you have 4 Nidus networks, 2 nice worms over here, 2 over there. All of a sudden, where does he go? Where does he go? Let's take another question. Another question. I have a runny nose. Oh yeah, for any of you who are curious, I'll be streaming the mono battles. I'll be playing in windowed mode, which kind of stinks, but, you know, whatever. Oh hey, Delirious Koala says, Dear Day 9, when and how can Reapers be useful in a game I'm mainly interested in mid to late game? Oh yeah. So there's a lot of Terran styles that revolve around having a cute army so that when you do engage, you have just the right stuff, right? So that's something like low barracks, but high Viking and Ghost count. So you have some Marines and Marauders, but it's the Vikings and the Medevacs and the Ghosts that are really making you awesome. But if you go for a really aggressive, big army style, like we're talking a lot of barracks plus Blue Flame Hellions, that composition is only able to be dealt with if you are in a good defensive location as Protoss. If you can use your sentries. So what I love doing, I've been doing this so much and it's so great, a big Blue Flame Hellion infantry mix, and then you just do a round of Reapers, like 6 to 7 Reapers. And then when you move out with your force, he has to close up to a defensive position. Like if we come back and look at the map, what's really fun is like when, you know, if Socke's base is here, you move with your big force right here, he has to pull everything here, ready to defend in force field, and then you pop up here with Reapers and start picking stuff away, and then you pop back down. You kind of gently push, then you kind of pop back up here. Works best on Xel'Naga Caverns that I've found, going right to the front. Ooh, he's trying to get ready, and Reapers waltz right into his main. Very, very obnoxious to deal with. Another important thing to note about Reapers, though, and specifically coming back to this game, is that you need to kind of set them up so that they are possible to... oh, crap, what happened to that sentence? Damn it, I know what I wanted to say, but the words... Let me give it another shot. Reapers are an obviously good harassment unit, but you need to force them to work. Force them to work. And that doesn't mean that, oh, they kind of suck and you need to, you know, smack around a little bit and coax them into working. What I mean is that Boxer does drops against Zerg by having a huge army move forward, and then he does a drop all the way up here. This drop that's swinging over, it's only successful because it is directly linked with this big attack, and it's forcing Zerg to kind of be like, holy shit. If I send any units there to defend that drop, I lose versus this whole huge force. So I better try to do something cute with that. You can force Reapers to work. You just manipulate where his units are, and then you run the Reapers around. I mean, hell, let's say it was the same game, and you had a bunch of Marauders, Marines, Medevacs waltzing up here. You move here. Protoss pulls here. 6 Reapers on the other side of the map pop on in. Obnoxious to deal with, but very, very, very effective. We're going to take one more question, and then I'm going to power down the stream just briefly. Just power down the stream. Subscribers, whatever you do, do not go anywhere. Do not go anywhere. I'm going to take one more question. Yeah, Grim Jawsix says, Dear Day 9, are you going to play? Actually, this will be the last question. Jawsix says, Dear Day 9, are you going to play with viewers on the EU server as well sometime? Yes. That's going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 301. By the way, I do have a Euro account. I purchased it with my very own Euros. And the exchange rate was horrible. It was like $68 to purchase it. Not $69 because I'm not juvenile. Wraps up Daily number 301. I'm just going to power the stream down, and I'm going to pull it right on back so that way we can get a reasonable record set up. Whatever you do, do not go anywhere. Do not go anywhere. Fun Day Monday tomorrow. Submit your hero games to Monday at day9.tv. And I am in a wonderful mood. You guys are just the nicest people in the whole universe. I just, I like you so much. You're so nice. I'm casting to who? To my friends. I like them so